Soil testing, I think, is an interesting potential tool. I think from a fertilizer application perspective, if we feel our calibration studies for phosphorus are fine, it's probably good to say yes or no. Should we apply phosphorus or not? But is it going to be a very effective tool in reducing runoff? And you might say that under normal fertilized conditions, at least from the data that we have, that we don't see this great connection between soil levels and phosphorus and runoff. However, if we exceed those and get up above some level, and so far in turf, I don't think we have the ability to say what that number may be, that therefore those conditions, and in this case we saw with animal-based manure compost applications as soil amendments, we could get those up pretty high, and therefore that would be pretty important not to add any more phosphorus and maybe not to add any more compost in those systems either. Certainly a concern of anything that's in a stormwater system that has potential for phosphorus, so tree leaves or flowering parts of trees that deposited, anything that's going to have a potential source could be important. And also, we've also seen some data that some of the de-icing and traction material that's used in the winter can contain phosphorus, and again, those are put right into the stormwater drain system, which can be a problem. So it may be worth checking the phosphorus content of those. So, we're at questions for us. See?
I had my watch set the time. Well done, Mark.
I told you I could be on time. These guys always give me a bad time.
Well done, Mark. Questions?
Marty, if you maintain the nitrogen level, let's say 3 pounds per thousand or something, how do you think that's going to affect runoff and phosphorus losses? I'm just thinking about variation in phosphorus amounts.
Well, there is some information, I didn't show it, that the source of nitrogen can affect the phosphorus amount in runoff. And initially it was a little shocking that the more water-soluble source you use, such as urea versus something very slow release, there were greater amounts of phosphorus loss in the runoff, and loading rates. Pounds per acre or kilograms per hectare. And it probably, and I think someone asked kind of where do you think the phosphorus is coming in the system coming off turf? I think it's coming out of the tissue. So if you increase growth rate by urea compared to slow release sources, you may be getting more phosphorus up in the system then that therefore can run off. So I think there's that relationship. I think maybe the more nitrogen you put on, you may be driving the uptake of phosphorus, and you could potentially have more phosphorus runoff. But the other caveat is if as you can see with nitrogen, if you're increasing density and you're reducing the volume of runoff, they either cancel each other out, or you may see less runoff unless you're under really high runoff site conditions. So there is, it gets complicated with nitrogen because it does change a number of the things that they could have changed phosphorus and nitrogen loss from that perspective.
Good, Stu.
Two questions. The first for you, the second for both of you. With regard to the creeping bent grass versus ryegrass runoff situation, would you attribute that to the fact that bent grass has, quite a significant thatch layer and ryegrass pretty much doesn't?
Yeah, watch keys work. It's either thatch or, if you look at, they showed half the volume of runoff, but this is one of the rare examples where volume didn't relate to loading rates, where you had higher loading rates even though you had less volume. And they try to attribute it to mostly, there is a thatch difference, but I think there's more, but there may be an overall tissue difference. You have so much greater shoot density, and the way, I think as you're mowing, whether those bent grass leaves are going to leak more plant nutrients out of that system because of the amount of shoots that you have compared to perennial ryegrass. I think it's something, if we're looking at kind of turf features or maybe any kind of plant features, it gives us an indication that just because you get higher density doesn't always relate to the fact that it may be less runoff, because or at least loading with phosphorus, because you did see less runoff, but not.
The question for both of you is the state Florida proposed rule has a restriction of no more than ½ pound of phosphorus per year. Now, in fairness to you and Brian, I know your work's cool season grasses.
Right.
Your dormancy periods are more well defined and longer. but could either one of you hazard a guess as, and understanding, you guys know something about warm season grasses, with this half-pound limit of phosphorus per year, actually bringing on some of these conditions that you and Brian have shown, where by limiting the phosphorus, limiting the fertilization, you actually promote a greater runoff.
Sandy soil.
Well, I mean, because, and I'll let Brian, if you want to try to answer it, I mean, Florida conditions, it is a little different than what we're dealing with on grass and soil and climate. It'd be interesting to understand how they try to develop this rate, and they may have response studies in Florida that show that a half a pound of P2O5 per year, per thousand weight per year is adequate to maintain density. I mean, we tend to see, when we see a phosphorus deficiency, it's a quality, and it's more of a color than a density effect. But if you start losing density because you're not maintaining adequate growth, then that's going to be a problem. But I'm not sure what the rationale behind that rate is. And from what I heard this morning, there may not have been much, but
That's what was being sold in Florida. There was a lot that had nothing to do with agronomics or environmental impact.
Hold on.
Yeah, Brian's good.
Didn't Larry Schumann do work at Georgia phosphorus runoff?
He did, and he published it with Schwartz. I think that was phosphorus.
That's the only work I know in the South. We look at the runoff phosphorus. But
that was runoff too.
About half a pound, whether that's enough. I think soil testing, I don't know what the soil test levels are. At least in Minnesota, in the metro area, we don't need phosphorus for fertilizer. So, one of the good parts about this legislation has been that, our soils have plenty of supply for our turf. And so now we have access to these zero phosphorus fertilizers. If in Florida the soil test levels are low and you are, you need it, then absolutely you have to apply something. Where they got a half pound from, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We got to wrap this up, but I don't imagine that's a hard thing to answer. I mean, they got sufficiency data, and we know the soils. They get a lot more rainfall in Florida and sandier soils, but that shouldn't be a hard thing to do. So, well done, Marty.
Thank you.
Okay.